We're going to start with a prayer as our tradition. This is from Robert Benson's Daily Prayer. For the splendor of the whole creation and the beauty of this world, for the wonder of life and the mystery of love, for the blessings of family and friends, and the loving care that surrounds us on every side, and for this day's work, for the things that demand our best, for the things that delight us, and for the disappointments and failures. We thank you, O Lord. We are going to be talking about the Franklin Garden today, and I want to give you a little history on the garden. It was founded in 2013 under the direction of Hubby Clark. It was initially a 40 by 40 postage stamp plot that now has evolved into a half-acre demonstration and production garden that serves as the cornerstone of Priory's sustainability program. The Franklin Garden was established with the help of Priory parents. Initially, Ingrid, Bly, and William Shue, parents of Anthony Shue, class of 2010, provided a gift in honor of Ingrid's parents, Frank and Pauline Lynn, thus Frank Lynn Garden. I didn't know that until yesterday. So I love the history. They also, subsequent gifts from that initial donation supported the building of the actual garden with the boxes and the planting areas. And then subsequent gifts from Ingrid and other generous Priory parents, of whom some are Ingrid, have helped to raise the money needed to build the garden pavilion that we enjoy today. Students have also helped the garden grow. The compost area and chicken run were class projects in Mr. Clark's food production and ecological design and sustainability classes. The central planting table was created by middle schoolers in the woodworking class. Working on the assumption that if you build it, they will come, Mr. Clark and others have established the garden with the school's mission and overall education. The mission of the Priory's Franklin Garden is to serve as a physical and practical testament to the school's Benedictine value of stewardship. The garden area and program seek to promote, in principle and practice, a broader understanding of environmental sustainability and to provide the Priory community with a site for hands-on learning about agriculture, food, and collaborative enterprise. The founders of this educational garden, as did the early monks who established a system of work and prayer to sustain their monasteries, believe that working in a natural setting has its own reward. And working with natural systems is a fulfilling essential component to understanding one's place in the world. Students and parents have opportunities to gather, grow, and share in the Franklin Garden. The middle school offers 2 electives, the MS Garden and Stewards in Action. In high school, students can take plant and soil science, ecological design and sustainability with Hubby Clark, and discourse of dining, food literature with Ms. Briggs. Class retreats feature time for the garden work and reflection. All of these classes provide kids with opportunities to learn about seed germination, plant cultivation, harvest methods, soil science, plant ecology, and nutritional science. And in keeping with if you build, they will come philosophy, more teachers and their classes are availing themselves of the opportunity to use a garden as teaching space, and students are actually showing up for lunch on their own. Taking their own lunch. Picking, harvesting from the garden, making their lunches. Parents are also welcome to help out in the Franklin Garden. Jill hosts parents on Friday mornings at Flora et Labora. It's a little play on words. Instead of ora et labora, which is prayer, and where flora is, they're going to go up there and you're going to plant. Work in the garden. Jill and her team of volunteers plant and harvest and enjoy food and recipes based on Franklin Garden ingredients. In fact, she made her signature kale salad for us today, which you can sample anytime you like during this talk. It's wonderful. The kids are addicted to it. The staff, I think, it's a mainstay in their lunches. So it's quite a movement up there, the garden movement. Other parents have hosted canning workshops and cooking classes, such as Claudia Gioli. she disappeared, who is Discourse of Dining's volunteer chef. She assists the class that Kendra teaches. These efforts provide meaningful parent involvement and help ensure collaboration with the school's kitchen to supply garden harvest for student meals. Help support the garden. Come in Friday mornings, 8:35 to about 10. You can come and join Jill in the garden, and she'll put you right to work. Encourage your student to take a gardening class, such as Discourse of Dining with Kendra Briggs. She will entice you right now with her course. Kendra is the English department's chair. She received her MA in British and American Literature at the University of Utah. And Kendra, can I ask you to take the stage?
Sure. And we also give a quick shout out to Jill. So I have so much to say, I'll try to use my time. But before I even start, I'll have to say what I prepared today and what you just read that I know Hubby gave you, we didn't talk to each other about that, and there's a lot of synchronicity in what we're saying, so I'm really excited about that.
The other two credit Hubby too. They had to read it because it was Hubby's words.
Yeah. The other 2 points I would say is the pavilion. If you helped create that, thank you. I mean, the garden obviously is amazing, but the pavilion has changed the way that Jill and I are able to run the class and the way that we're able to teach and use this space. It has professionalized the space in a way that students come ready not only to play in the garden, but ready to do the learning piece. So thank you for the pavilion. It's wonderful. And the other is that this class would not exist in the way that it exists if I didn't have Jill as my co-teacher and my support. So once again, thank you, Jill. When Kathy asked me to talk, just a little bit about what the class was about, I was thinking about all of the different entry roads that I had into the class. But what I'm going to talk about today is really kind of the root of why I'm teaching this class. And we talk a lot. There's a lot of food puns in the class, and I encourage them, so you may hear those. Whether they're purposeful or not, they come out. So I actually want to start with the mission statement that you already know. That we are in fact a school that is looking to assist students in creating meaningful and balanced lives, and that they are in fact developing as lifelong learners as stewards, which Hubby mentioned as well. And that kind of became the cornerstone. When I was developing this course, I was trying to think about what is it that the students need from us as mentors, as models, as educators. What do they need to go out into the world and sustain themselves and be participants in the world? And I feel like at the root of everything is food. That is what we need to survive, and that we need to really be able to talk thoughtfully about it on many levels. So really holding the mission statement in mind drove the creation of the class. And so I'm going to kind of talk about that in view of the curriculum and in view of the mission. So in terms of stewardship, I have for each of these, I have a little essential question that drives the class. And one of the aspects of the class is thinking about how food choices can be an act of social justice. Right? How can we have integrity with the land and hospitality for others, and create a circular system where we're really participating in helping everybody get access to the whole foods that kind of heal our minds when we're out in the dirt, but also heal our bodies. And so this is from last year's class, and that stewardship in terms of the garden. We are up in the garden 1 day a week. If you know our schedule, we have classes 3 days a week. And I decided, again, in planning this and in talking to Jill, who again has been phenomenally supportive, I felt that to really make this a sincere effort and an authentic effort, it couldn't be like, well, we'll go to the garden every, once a month to see what's happening. That they really needed to figure out what it means to be a steward, and that is having enough practice to see, here's what I did and here's the outcome. I did this input and now I have this output. And so being able to close that loop. So I made the choice that we were going to be in the garden once a week and do more experiential learning to try to close the loop between what we're talking about in the classroom and what they're practicing. So that has been something, I'm year 3 into the class, and that has been something that I'm constantly playing with. How do I make sure that I'm giving them literary curriculum, but also providing the space for the actual learning. And it's been huge. The kids are really upset. Last week it was raining and we canceled the garden. And they came into the class like, it's not raining that hard, can't we go up? And I said, is this a reflection on my class? Like, you want in the room with me? So in thinking about stewardship, I wanted to talk a little bit about the curriculum. This is the first unit. And the way the course works is I say, we need to look at what are our food systems right now? How have we potentially failed to steward the world around us with our current agricultural systems, and what are the impacts? So we do some nonfiction reading. Michael Pollan's In Defense of Food, Food Inc. We do some TED Talks. We read some Wendell Berry, and if you're familiar with kind of environmental writing, eco-literacy, these are the names that are pretty big. So this is kind of a nonfiction look at what is it that we've done right now? Where is the ground underneath us, literally? So that we can understand what the potential is for stewardship, what the need is for food justice. And once we understand that, we can say, well, actually the food systems right now are pretty out of balance. What we're doing is not sustainable for ourselves. Right? It is not hospitable to the world and global warming, and it's not hospitable to everybody who needs access to food. So after we do that, and in fact right now we're working on our research papers where they get to pick a topic that has come up and go deep into research. So after they finish their research, we say, okay, so there are some issues with balance right now. And that becomes the next piece of the class. We look at literature and try to think about how is it that literature and other writing can help us to understand ways to create balance. And balance is so broad in the way that we apply it to the class. I think it's balance in terms of their lives. Getting out to the garden is balance, right? Looking at the broader perspective, and I kind of love this. This is last 2 weeks ago, right? The kids are out in the garden, they're looking at the leaves, and while it is educational, it is also just a place for pause. It's a place for reflection. They have so much going on, classes, co-curriculars, internships, so much. To honor that in order for us to seek balance, sometimes it's appropriate to take a step out of the classroom or a step out of the activities that can be really passionate and generative, but can also wear us down. So how do we restore? And again, that goes back to stewardship. How do we restore ourselves so that we are ready to participate? How do we help the land so that it can be hospitable to growth? And so we try to understand the link between literature, sensory pleasure, sensory language, and a place of balance as restoration, reflection, and pleasure. So in thinking about balance and the things I just mentioned, we read literature like Water for Chocolate and Nani Yoshimoto Kitchen. And one of the points I make for both of these texts is that they are texts in translation. And so just as we cook, a recipe is something that gets translated based on your interests, your flavors, what you like. The same thing with language, that it hits all of us differently and we have different palates, that it's appropriate to give ourselves broad exposure to flavor so that we know what we want to eat. And then we also look at Alice B. Toklas' cookbook, and there's so many other resources. I just wanted to hit kind of the highlights. But it's wonderful when we do like Water for Chocolate. Was it last year? Claudia brought up her family's molcajete. And we made salsa with the kids at that moment. And again, trying to find ways to bring the garden practice into the conversation in terms of the food that we are making and the books that we're looking at. If you've read the Michael Pollan In Defense of Food, one of the claims he makes is that we have lost our food traditions. We have lost eating within our culture or eating within our kind of family. And so this kind of speaks to that. How do we return back to family eating? How do we return back to culture? And let that be a guide towards the choices we make rather than a nutrition label. How do we let our palate drive that? So that helps us to think about balance a little bit. And then in terms of meaning, and I put this last even though it's backwards from how it is in the main mission statement, I think we have to start with stewardship and understand our participation in the system. And then understand that we need to get into balance. And once we have that, we can actually start talking about meaning. And meaning in terms of our Benedictine values, that it is integrity in relationship to the earth. It is about our own individual participation within a larger community. And within that, one of the things that I think the kids get the most out of in the garden is that we are harvesting together, we are planting together, we are cooking together, and it is a communal effort to make food that we can all share in that moment. And so I really poke into the idea that when we eat food, it's not just, well, do I have enough protein to keep me going, right? But how am I using this space to develop relationships? How do I use this when I'm at lunch, right, up in the cafeteria, or when I'm sitting with my family or my friends? How do I use that space to engage in conversation, to develop memories, and to build meaning? And that meaning can be just in the moment, in that one space, or it may extend to something deeper in terms of practices. And we do that through a lot of reflective writing, and I'll talk at the end of this about some of the assignments that we do. But in terms of meaning, kind of where the course ends is a discussion on gratitude and spirituality. That if we understand our current food systems and how they might be out of balance and broken, then we can start to retrace ways to put ourselves back in balance, to step out into the garden, to dig our hands into the dirt, to feel connected. And once we feel connected,
It's our gala chair.
I'm so sorry. Big things are going on. I hope this comes big donations. Yeah. That's the big donations. Steady to the million. That's it. Thank you. So we end with looking at poems and prayers. The first year I taught the class, I started it here. The first year I was like, we need to be grateful for our food. Let's figure out why. And the kids were like, yeah, whatever. And I realized it was a lot powerful. It was like, here's our system. And when we walk through it by the end, it's like, wow, we've been in the garden all semester. We've been seeing the work and labor we've been put in. We are, the salad bed there, while Jill put it all together, it was the kids that harvested it. It was the kids that planted it yesterday, and they're really starting to understand, like, if I do this here, I eat this later. That's great. And so we do mindful eating in the classroom, and we talk about gratitude. And that's where we end the course. We end the course with, in order to have meaning, we have to notice. We have to take a moment to step back and actually have gratitude. So we do research on how across the world, regardless of the culture or the religion, there are prayers. People pray over food, right? It is around the globe. So why is it that people pray over their food? There's something going on there. And so we kind of dig into that deeper. And I would say that's sprinkled throughout the course. When we are eating in the garden, we do have a meditation or a prayer. We do, even within the class, we do mindful eating, and kids bring stuff. Vincent Cullinan just brought in blood pudding for everybody. And I will say, out of the 17 people in the class, like 13 of them tried it. We talk about the fact that there's the research around trying new foods is that you kind of have to try it. You have to try it about 20 times. If you don't like it, keep going back to it. Right? Blood pudding. It's actually part of his. He and his partner are doing their senior project related to food, because his partner was in my class last year and he's in the class this year, and so he's looking at his Irish heritage. And so it's an Irish dish, and so he brought it into the class. So again, they're cooking for each other as well. It's not just Jill preparing stuff for them, eating the garden. They're bringing stuff in to share. But with that, these are two of the texts that we use for this. The Hungry Ear is actually a collection of poetry, and I find that a softer way in with them. That we look at poetry, and then from poetry we look at poetry as a form of prayer, and then we actually look at prayer, and they end up writing their own prayers and their own poems of gratitude. And to really acknowledge that, in fact, the meaning comes really from gratitude and from that awareness, and that's ultimately what creates the balance and what allows us to understand our stewardship, because it's a circular loop. So I'll just talk briefly about some of the work that we do in class, and then I'll leave you to eat some salad. Maybe. There you go. So part of our homework, and Jill and I have talked about this is a junior-senior elective. A lot of our seniors are going off to college, and they're going to be eating a lot of cafeteria food. And so we wanted to give them autonomy and power to know that there's a shared kitchen on their floor, they can cook, that they can do stuff. So we start with basic stuff. We start with making vinaigrettes. And that's their homework. They have to go home and they have to make vinaigrettes and they have to do a little food blog. They do journaling. So we do a lot of reflective writing as well as the kind of analysis and argumentative college level. We do that in our research and around our literature, but we do weekly journals where they're able to actually sit down and either think of their memories with their family, their food, or experiences that they've had and say, well, what am I thinking about this? What was the texture? How is this shaping my understanding? And that does both the reflective piece that I think is mission driven, and it's also the literature piece. We're talking about how do you use sensory language? How do you draw people in to that moment to help them? And so with that, that's the Alice B. Toklas cookbook and other food blogs that we're looking at. The other thing, so this is their vinaigrettes, and Lena actually roasted vegetables for her vinaigrette. And then we have even the students, Vivian here is in the dorms. And so I make sure, even if they're in the dorms, that they have access to the things they need so that they can do the cooking. And then we build out, we've got a site where we're doing the recipes in class, and then they're getting to pick what they want to go home and do. And so they're building a small repertoire of some basic recipes so that they can cook for themselves. And with that, they also have to go to the market. We're in the middle of our market research right now where I send them out into the world to a market. And the seniors, I have them do research. If you've accepted to a college, look at your college. Do they have a sustainability program? Do they have markets on campus? Where's the nearest market? Where, if you want access to this stuff, can you go get it? Even if you cook for your dorm mates, once a month or something, what does that do to bring you together? So we really try to be purposeful in building that out. And then the big kind of centerpiece for this is at the end of the semester before the seniors leave for their project, we do a class cookbook. Where we've been developing our journaling and our memoir writing all along. And so we put together a course cookbook where they have chosen a family menu or something that they have connection to, and they have to cook it. I try to get them to cook it twice, once at home and then once for the class. Sometimes it's hard to do it both times depending on the dish, so sometimes they just bring it to class. But then we have a week of feast where we're bringing our foods together and they're doing a little presentation on here's my dish, here's why I cooked my dish. And so you get the recipe, and then you can see just a little bit of it here. You get this memoir with it. And so it's this memoir cookbook that they've cultivated as a class together, and that kind of becomes the anchor for them. And then they share that. And this, I like to point out how professional it looks, because these pictures were actually taken by students. So these are not things that I stole off the internet. These were actually, so I've been working with Sean Madsen, who teaches photography, to try to help the kids and get them some skills. But this is student work, all of it. And in fact, the whole cookbook was put together with the help of Betty Chen last year. So that's it. The final kind of mantra we have for the class, we think about food and dining. We call it the discourse of dining, because it's not just about food, it's about the dining experience and how we communicate. And so one of the things that we anchor from an early reading is that food is utility. It is necessary to keep us going because we have to eat to live. But a dining experience also allows us to have sociability, to have a community that we're engaging with, and that's building actually our relationships beyond just the food. And ultimately, good dining is also pleasurable, that you're playing with the flavors. And that is true both on the plate as well as within literature, that we need to have our senses heightened so that we can engage in that pleasure. And from that, hopefully, that is where the pause and the reflection come from, so that it continues beyond the school. So that's it.
We all want to know where we can sign up. If you have any questions about the personality,
especially because Kathy mentioned the emergence of the Franklin Garden coming from from Anthony Shu's family. Anthony Shu went on to get his degree in sociology from Princeton. And then he did some chefing. And he's actually coming to the class next week, and he's going to be giving a lecture on the soft power of cultural food and exchange, and he's going to be cooking with us because he's been working in kitchens. So that's the other piece in terms of stewardship that I just had so much to say that I forgot to mention. But it's extending beyond the class. It's bringing alumni back. I'm also talking to Katie Thau, and she's going to be coming in and doing bread with us. So it's really having a long-term effect, and I love that Anthony's going to be coming back kind of full circle to his family's garden. So thank you. Sorry.
Wonderful. Okay, Valentine.
Can I just say really quickly before we go off to Franklin Garden, I have an 8th grade son who had to go to the garden one day to get something for his science class and ended up missing his entire science class. Because Nick ended up sitting there and they cooked eggs and they went to the garden and he got drawn in, and now he has this passion and love of the garden, and he goes at lunch and eats and he cooks, and he's discovered this new love of something that he had no idea he loved, and he got to get eggs and help with the chickens and he helped build the fence, and so I just love that he's found this new little thing that he feels super passionate about. Thank you, Jill, because I know you work with him and talk with him a lot, so it's amazing. So thank you. Anyway, so Club 60, it's in a week and a half. I hope you're all coming, and I'm just going to talk quickly. There's dancing this year. We got lots of feedback that we never had dancing before, so we made it work. It's going to be really fun, and we have a DJ that's going to be great, and I really hope that you guys come and plan on staying until 11:30 and dancing. We have the club a lot later than normal, so I think it's going to be a ton of fun.
So the catalog will be done, the paper catalog will be done Wednesday, so that will be in your children's backpacks. So please take a look at that. Yeah, that's tomorrow. So, yes.
So if you can't come, can you do some to the to the auction? Can you bid on these items online, somehow?
Yes, so our online catalog goes out on Monday.
Okay. And if you need a link, we can, we'll send out an email that will have a link for people who can't come but do want to participate, so.
Yeah, lots of opportunities. So, so that's it. So please take a read and
Check your children's backpacks.
Yes.
You know, they can be very
No way.
They are there.
No way am I sticking my hand in.
So any other questions? Yes.
Just everybody in the school can start bidding on the silent on the 12th, or am I wrong?
Monday.
Monday.
That's it.
Yeah. So
Anybody who's not going to the gala can start bidding on silent items on Monday.
Yes.
Early, so
Yes.
they don't have to be,
Right,
just one of the.
right.
Yeah, thank you for saying.
So, I love how Kendra started with our mission statement, so I'm gonna also go back to that mission statement when talking about the gala and our most important item of the night. So, our mission statement to raise kids that, for a world in need of their gifts, comes up in our biggest item of the night, which is Fund a Need. So, Fund a Need is supporting scholarship once again. I hope you will consider whether you're coming or not to please support scholarship for the kids who are at the school, who can't afford the tuition. It's a big item for us, and I hope you're there to see it, because we have a great program and it'll be lots of fun. But remember, Fund a Need. That's it.
Here's this, I have one more. Can you do that online too? I think we've gotten that taken care of, but you might want to do that for people who
Right.
can't come.
Right. We will have a, yeah. We're figuring that out.
It's in the works. Yeah.
It's in the works. But yes, there are ways for you to give if you're not going to be there. Talk to me and I can get you.
And I'm sure there will be a way to give to Fund a Need after.
Yeah, it's just.
Just bring you keep on All right.
It's a good reminder.
Thanks, we're looking forward to it. It's going to be super fun. So.
And also thank you to everybody in the room that's been volunteering and helping. It's been tremendous, and I just want to do a shout out to all of you too. So thank you.
Thank you.
He looks like a zombie, is that right?
I don't even remember that shirt.
Yeah, it looks like you're about 30 there, doesn't it? All of you so young. So welcome to our distinguished panel. We are so honored to have the three of you here this morning. These are your very respected backgrounds. All of you have been so involved in many I love that Matt taught law and order here, right? That's so great, and I think that we're going to be getting Adam in front of us all on positive psych, which is something that we all need to be working on with our kids. And Summer Bridge program, you just live here all the time, literally doing so much. So our focus this morning is part of our 60th anniversary celebration of the Benedictine values. Yeah, sorry, we need to just switch to the next slide, which all of you know very well. We're focusing on community this morning. These three are super involved in so many aspects of community, so we thought that you would represent really well the various things that Priory is doing in terms of building community. I went onto the website and found the strategic plan, which seemed like a pretty good place to start in digging into where we are currently. From the current vision, this is what I found, and along with community, along with spirituality, hospitality, integrity, and individuality, the value of community is defined as together we find strength and purpose in supporting one another. It's very simplistic, but this goes a little bit deeper. So with this framework in mind, I wanted to turn to all of you to get your input in regards to these goals of creating a warm, inclusive, and reflective environment in which each student, day and boarding, are encouraged to lead a life inspired by Benedictine values. Can you offer your insight on these goals for our students? Our first question is regarding engaging experiences which allow students to take risks, develop their passions, and express their authentic voices. Maybe start with you, Gulliver, since you look at diversity as well as community service, and you could speak to that question.
Yeah, so I think, as I think about just community service, and Matt, you'll be great to jump in with this. When I first got here, I remember our community service was sort of the standard, hey, you need to complete 10 hours, by the end of the year, and that's kind of the metric and goal for actually engaging with different communities. And what we found is the kids were just like checking something off of a box, just checking off a box to show that they had completed something, and there was really no internalizing of what community service was. And Matt, I think there was a committee, maybe 6 years ago? 7 years ago?
Yeah, it was, it all blurs now. About 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah, we sat down.
That's what happens when you have kids.
Yeah. Is it bad that was happening before I had about 4 or 5 years ago, we sat down with students and we talked about the community service requirement. It was a number of seniors, and they said they were really honest with us. They said, to be completely honest, it's just an hours thing for us. We fib the hours on the things when we turn them in. We'll add a couple hours here or there, and then it comes May, and it's 2 weeks later, and we haven't done it. And so we go and we find like a walk for life, and we go and we sit in the park for 10 hours or 6 hours. We say we did 10 hours, we turn it in. And we thought, wow, for a school where giving back to the world in need of their gifts is part of their mission, that's horrible. And that's what really sort of led us to then spend a year looking at what other schools were doing and seeing what's worked and talking to schools and finding out. And we talked with one of our current parents, her sister, or alum parents now, her sister was Silicon Valley, some nonprofit where they basically work with getting kids involved in the nonprofits, in public service. And she had a lot of great ideas and stuff, and so that's how we sort of revamped everything at that point. So.
And started off with thinking of, what does direct service look like versus indirect service. and sort of trying to find a way to integrate, pre-learning about that into theology classes, into the health classes, so for like 9th graders theology, for 10th graders in health, because it was the one sort of common class they were all in together, and then going out, reaching out and finding organizations that wanted to work with the school, and so it sort of was born this idea of let's have sort of a service week that the kids go out and actually spend a week, and it is learning. That was sort of the thing we had to sell also to our community. It's still sort of experiential learning. It's learning in a different way outside of the classroom, and so that sort of led us to these connections. And I think it's been authentic for us to do it in this way because we are pushing kids to have to go outside of their comfort zone, to have to build things like empathy, which I think you need as sort of a baseline before you can think about some of these bigger ideas of really internalizing community. And even going into my other role of director of equity and inclusion, also then looking in that aspect to really look at cultural competency and some of those bigger things. We can't just kind of teach them, talk about them. We need kids to really go out and experience them. So I think what's been really cool is through the progression of that, we're at a point now where we've extended it to a full week. We have now global, international programs, education that kids are able to go on. We have some outdoor ed pieces that have service integrated, but they're also learning. Like we have one this year called Snow Science for the kids, for the seniors, where they're going to go to Tahoe, they're going to measure and learn about snow, and then they're doing service for the state. So on a really macro level. And so I think it's this experience that's key to be able to be internalized, to create things within an individual that then really tie to understanding, okay, I am not only engaging in community, but I'm learning what it means to work with several different types of communities on a micro level and then on a macro level, to integrate them, to put myself in somebody else's shoes, and then to sit back and reflect. And so I think all these things are huge for our kids, and I think it was really born out of giving kids time during the school day to do these types of things, or in our case during a week. And now we've expanded it this year, and I think it fits really well with who we are, our mission and our values.
Adam, do you want to add anything from there?
Yeah, the part of this first question, Carrie, that really stood out to me was like the risk-taking sort of piece of it, and then thinking about this up in the dorm. So we have 50 kids up there, about 30 boys, about girls from 13, 14 countries currently. That's pretty standard. Risk-taking up there for that group looks really different kid to kid. So for some of those kids, the riskiest thing they could do is go to bed early. For other of those kids, it's crack a book, right? So, seriously, I mean, like the range is really, not only in terms of ages, but then sort of like, what you care about, and we kind of want that up there. We want it to be a really diverse community, not only, ethnically, but racially, in terms of your social background, that sort of thing. So what that requires myself and the staff to sort of do is kind of create IEPs for each kid, like on some level, right? Like we have to sort of say, hey, what does this kid need? You don't want to push them too much, too little. So we're doing a lot of, Carrie mentioned sort of like my positive psych background, we're doing a lot of sort of like data collection up there this year. This is my first year up there, where I'm just having kids measure sleep. I'm just having kids record what they eat. I'm having kids kind of think through how much exercise they're getting. I have one RF who has a background in narrative medicine. He's helping kids kind of think through how they kind of build meaning into their lives, these sorts of things. So these kind of abstract concepts that feel pretty risky for different kids, depending on kind of where they are on that spectrum. I think we can put some teeth to it, and that's what we're trying to do up there. Again, I've been up there for 10 minutes now, so it's a slow burn, but it's exciting. Yeah.
And, I mean, both of you are building such incredible programs right now. You two in addition, yes.
Oh, okay. Do you have a kid?
So the next one is, it's so salient right now, is one of the goals in the current vision is to foster an inclusive and equitable community where all students feel welcome, understood, and respected. They're looking for what Priory could be as a warm and welcoming village, a place that feels like home for all. And how are each of you in your respective roles and in what you've been doing here over the many years you've been here, looking at that?
So I think in a lot of ways, it's kind of a two-pronged approach to do that. One, you have to bring the students in the first place, who are from all different diverse backgrounds. And then once they're here, you have to support them in the way that's going to be most beneficial for them. A lot of the kids that are coming to our school, from the admissions side, we can sort of do the legwork and get the kid in. And once we get the kid in, a lot of times it's tempting as an admissions person to just say, okay, they're in, we're done, we did it, all right, woohoo, right? You're not being fair to do it that way, right? You have to then think about, okay, well, now that they're here, they're coming from such a different background than what a lot of the other students are coming from here, or the school experience here is so different from the school experience that they've been in, that we really have to focus, and this is where a lot of what Gulliver does, and then also what Adam does in the boarding program comes into play, because once they're here, we've got to then support them and make sure they have all the resources, all the attention and everything they need. They have safe spaces where they can go to talk about things. And so I think that's one thing. I think in recent years here at the Priory, I think we're putting a lot more emphasis on both of those sides of things, actually, and really trying to look at it from all sides. I think if you look at the boarding program, I say this a lot to people, you will never find a more diverse group of 55 students anywhere. I mean, it is so incredibly diverse. And the amazing thing is that it is such a tight community. And you have kids from the other side of the world, from countries, from families that have more wealth than small countries, and you have people in the dorms who are coming, it's a family of 6 that lives in a studio apartment, and yet they all get along, and it's really kind of amazing to see. And one thing we always hear back from the students, we talk to them in senior exit surveys, we talk to them over the years, and this goes back quite a ways, is that for a lot of our students who are coming from underrepresented minority populations, the dorms is where they feel home. That's their safe space, because they feel totally accepted for who they are. It's such a diverse group, and it's really powerful to hear them talk about that experience up in the dorms.
So what's the magic you're doing up there, Adam?
Well, it's very easy to go carry when you got Matt making that pitch for
Now you just have to live up to what I just said.
I'm a big fan of catching kids being good. I think the data is really overwhelming in terms of change agents, in terms of moving and sort of reinforcing and then sort of changing behavior. If you catch people being good, it works short, medium, and long term so much better than catching them being bad. Now, look, you still have to catch kids being bad if they're being bad, that's true, but what I've tried to do with the RX up there, so that's the residential faculty, the full-time people up there that work with the kids after school, is I task them, and each day I have them send one email home to one of their advisees about something sort of positive, good going on in their kid's life, right? Of course the discipline stuff is going to fall to me. I'm the one that has to sort of suspend and expel, that's true. So what I want the RX to do is sort of shift their sort of perspective from what are you doing in there? Right, that sort of thing. I mean, that's part of their role, but instead shift it a little bit, so sort of catch them leveraging a strength, identifying a passion, what are you doing with yourself? So that's, in sort of 6 months, that's really helped because now the kids sort of not show off so much, it's sort of like they can connect with the adults up there and each other in a more positive way. On the other side of things, when things don't go well, we use a restorative justice approach up there that I've found to be really beneficial because it sort of shifts the focus from like big bad administrator with the big stick, and instead says, hey, who was harmed? How were they harmed? And what can you do now, right now? You can't change the past, but what can you do right now to try to remediate the harm a little bit, right? Again, if that's you being a butthead to your roommate, then maybe that's a conversation or whatever it is, we get pretty creative up there. But I think those things, that approach helps kids from all over the world, as Matt mentioned, feel a little bit more like it's home, like it's safe, like they can be a kid and screw up every once in a while and not, get booted. So, those are just two salient things that came up.
To piggyback off of what both Matt and Adam are saying, but going back a little bit to Matt's point, I think it's, I first started talking about community and the importance of community, and I think one thing we have to keep in mind when we're thinking about equity and inclusion is, well, whose community? When we're thinking community, when we're thinking about creating that aura, is everybody's voice heard? Is everyone a part of that? And so I think some of the best work we do when we bring kids in and identify is bringing out their individuality, bringing out their identity. Who are they? And do they feel heard? Do they feel like they're known? Right? And that's something we talk about also here at Priory, is we want every kid to feel known and loved. Right? And I think that comes from really allowing kids to dig down with their identity. Go down and say, I'm not a label that's been put on me by anybody, right? I'm not a post-it note of good kid, bad kid, smart student, bad student. I'm not these post-it notes that people put on me in life. That's not who I am. I'm going to identify who I am for you. And so I think allowing the kids to have the space to say, to do that, to explore that, and then to say, this is my identity. This is who I want to be seen as. These are the post-it notes I want you to see on me every day when you see me walking through the hall. They don't have halls here, sorry. Outdoor spaces. You're right. Like, that's what I want to be, that's who I want to be seen as. And own it, and be proud of that. And let everyone know that that's how you want them to see you. And then when we come back to community, we're really building a community that includes all voices and has the identities in a way that can be meshed into like more of a mixed salad, for example, than as opposed to a melting pot, which can tend to just come out one color, one perspective, one view. And so I think from what Matt's talking about in missions, when we're looking for that, when we come in and as teachers, as administrators, try to mold that aspect of identity to then really create an authentic community.
So I have one final question, just so we can let you guys go. I'm going to blend the last two, because I think you've already talked about how students can be positive contributing members, but the big goal that they have is instill in all students an understanding of global issues, an appreciation of the interconnectedness of cultures, and an awareness of their role as global citizens, in part by celebrating the richness of the boarding program. We're at such a juncture at looking at the importance of the boarding program. This is a really great opportunity to point out why we're so special because of that. It has its challenges, but how are we using that program as well as the community service and the diversity, as well as everything we're doing on the missions front to really bring a global view to everything parties.
So, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, we had talked about this idea about should we have some sort of global studies scholarship track, should we have some sort of global studies program within the school? Because what we realized is that, as many things work in the independent school world, you hear another school doing something, you're like, oh, that sounds interesting, right? And so I saw a couple of schools that had something like this. And I was reading about what they were doing, and I was thinking, God, that's really cool, the stuff they're doing. And then when we started looking at what we're doing, and I realized, we're actually doing all those things, we just don't package it as something and call it something. And so when we started looking at all the different things we're doing, we realized that there actually was a pretty robust emphasis on global studies and global issues. From the ninth grade social studies class that talks about specifically about global issues, to the existence of the boarding program and all the students from around the country, from around the world that are here, to a lot of our day students who are coming from other places. I mean, being in Silicon Valley, you have kids coming from families from all over the world who live here. And then on top of that, the trips that we were doing over the breaks, some of them were cultural immersion, some of them were language, some of them were service. And then a lot of our classes themselves focused on a lot of global types of things. We realized that we actually had a fairly robust program there. We opted not to actually design some sort of track or scholar designation around that, because we also thought that opened a little bit of a Pandora's box for other things. You know, why don't we have a music one? Why don't we have all those things? But at the same time, I think it was nice to recognize the fact that there were a lot of things that we were doing to really try and promote sort of a broader global awareness within our students.
I just wanted to promote the trips in general, and sometimes I feel like they're a little undersold. I know the New Orleans trip with Father Martin and Mr. Malak was life-changing for Eva. And a lot of the trips are a little undersubscribed, and I know Will just got back from Morocco, and he's like, why am I not living in that village in Morocco? And he was with Mr. Somerville and Mrs. Bucola, and it was just like life-changing. But I know that sometimes like the trips don't get enough kids, and I'm just wondering why they aren't like promoted,
Yeah.
you know, more.
And some trips to Kansas, because there isn't enough.
Right, yeah.
So part of it, Germany was canceled, I think,
Yeah.
recently.
Part of it, and sort of going back now, putting on the old hat, part of it was trying to figure out what's the optimal number of trips to offer. Because if you offer too many, you water them all down, and you don't get enough numbers for some of them. If you offer too few, there's not enough options out there. So it is a little bit of a sort of a guessing game. It also depends on how much some of the trips cost, where, you know, is this a destination that kids want to go to, what's going on during that trip. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. But overall, I would say that I've never had a kid come back from one of the trips and say that, you know, wow, that was a waste of time. You know, I had a bad experience. I think they always come back and just are like, wow, that was amazing. So.
I just wanted to say that collectively the three of you are like so underselling yourselves. You guys just did such a very humble about it that over the 6-7 years we've been part of the Priory, seeing the service, the emphasis on the service and the definition of what that means, and making the convenient service things become, you know, inconvenient and still worth it. I think it's been kind of a life, you know, changing experience for the kids and for the parents too. And before Kathy and Carrie, a couple of years before Kathy and Carrie, people were coming up to me from the schools and asking me in detail, how does Priory run that service week? And exactly how do they do that? And I know, Matt, you've taken phone calls from people from Menlo and others that are kind of using our model to, the concept of shutting down your school for a week is not, that's something a lot of schools necessarily embrace. And it's not a small feat, it's really hard for you guys to work with all these different Abilities United and all these different, you know, nonprofit organizations in the area, but it's such an enriching experience and it's really, really unique. I think that, you know, that shines out. The other thing I want to say is, if you haven't had a dorm kid in your home, you're missing out on, you know, half of the high school experience here. To be able to have that relationship and to cultivate that friendship. We inherited a German student for guardianship, and long story short, we've had her in our home a lot. And my daughter is going to be spending 2 weeks in an RV with her family during spring break. They don't know what they're getting into. For her, that's an amazing, and none of them speak English except for the daughter who's here at Priory. So I couldn't replicate that experience if I tried. And so that's the kind of opportunities that there are. They're not just for us to immerse them into our culture, but to flip it the other way. And I know there's a lot of other families that have graduated as alumni, and these kids are still visiting and enjoyment and so forth together. So if you haven't really leveraged that really unique, special thing about Priory, I really encourage it.
And I think the big paradigm shift in education is, how do we create those authentic experiences? How do we get kids to really feel, experience? Because those are the things they're going to remember and take with them, right? It might not necessarily be that one lesson in Algebra 2 or that one moment in English, and it might be too, right? Not necessarily that. But a lot of times, it is that experience, and I think that's who we sell ourselves. When Matt goes out, that's who we sell ourselves. When Adam brings in kids to the boarding program, we sell ourselves as being that school that will do that will cultivate that for your child so that they get that experience at the end of the day.
And are going off to college with this deeply ingrained in them. Those of us with college students, it just comes as a second nature.
Well, and I think we all know, but sometimes we forget, the only way you truly ever feel happy is when you're doing things for other people. That's, it's not the possessions you accumulate, you'll never get your happiness. So I think having a school that values we're gonna shut down and you're gonna really immerse yourself in the service towards others, it actually is an altruistic happiness that comes for our students, I think.
And they do a reflection piece afterwards
Yes. Yeah,
in
they
either
do.
theology or other.
And I think what's interesting, and Matt, tell me if you remember this too, but the kids, the first thing they'll, like, when it's happening during the week, they'll complain about, like, oh my gosh, it was a lot of work, it was, that's sort of that first initial time, but when you do get time to reflect and then write about it, and then reading how they reflect, it's little things that are happening sometimes that create bigger things. Like, I made some connections with classmates that I had never talked to, or never thought to ask them questions about themselves. I connected with this teacher. I saw and I learned something about working with kids who are underserved and underprivileged that just touched me on a deep level. These are 15, 16, 17-year-old kids who don't have their prefrontal cortex fully developed, that are already having these types of experiences that a lot of people might not have till college.
Well, and I think that technology has got them so focused on here, that they don't know what's out there, and they almost have to be ripped away from that technology and put into these uncomfortable situations where they have to speak to one another and other people that they don't know that they have the capability and the confidence to do that. It's really.
And maybe I could end on a two notes. One is, you were just saying like how we put service week together. Like Gulliver has like 35 balls in the air right now that he's jumping. Like that logistically, that service week, and it's expanded from when we first did it. And the first time we did it, I did it, and I remember I was like, oh my god. and it's so much more now. So from a logistical standpoint, like it is a mess, and it is hard to do, and it's amazing that it comes together. And so Gulliver definitely deserves some very large kudos for putting that together. And the last thing I wanted to leave us with was just the very first year we did the service week. It was just the freshmen and sophomores, and the freshmen were split into groups. They rotated in 4 different things. It was over MLK week. The original idea was that MLK, the holiday, there had been a movement to try and make MLK Day a day of service as opposed to a day of vacation. So we said, well, you know what, we're going to expand on that. We'll take the entire week, and we're going to make that a week of service. And we split it into 4 groups. They went to a different place each day. The idea there was that the 9th graders would get exposed to a lot of different types of service, in hopes that it kindles something sort of spark their interest. So that the following year as sophomores, the sophomores got to pick from about 7 or 8 different organizations that they would go and do a deep dive into that area of need for that entire week and learn about what it's like, what the needs are, what the experience is like for the people who are working in those areas, what the experience is like for the people who are receiving the help. And that first year, I think the first day of that service week, I had been around sort of going to different places and talking to people. And then the next 2 days I spent with a group of sophomores who were at Lytton Gardens, the elderly care center in the memory loss division, which is really hard. I mean, I don't know if any of you have been there before, but as an adult, it is really hard. And I went there on that second day, and I remember walking in and watching our kids and thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know if we prepared our kids for this. I don't know if they can handle this. And I had a call that night actually from one of our parents who said, I need to talk to you. I don't know if this is all right for my daughter. She came home, she doesn't want to go to school tomorrow. She doesn't want to go, she doesn't think she can handle it. And I said to him, I understand, and I was there, and I understand why she feels that way, but I really think there's a lot of value. One of the things we really want is to spend that whole week and to really get past that. And I saw him, so that was on Wednesday, and then I saw him Thursday night at a basketball game, the father, and he came around to me and he said, I have to tell you, she didn't want to go to school on that morning. She came home, and last night at dinner, all she could talk about was, oh my God, it was so amazing, you know, Richard was doing this, and then I played checkers with Elizabeth, and just kept talking about it, and she couldn't wait to go back, and she was already talking with her parents about, can I go back later on for another weekend? And by the end of that week, almost all those kids had a similar transformation. And it was one of those things where if we had still been doing the one-shot service thing here and there, we never would have gotten there. If they had gone there for one day, the lesson they would have learned, they would have come out of it and thought, you know what? That is not for me. Oh my God. But by the end of that Friday, when we left, the kids didn't want to leave on that Friday. And as a group in the van when we were driving home, they were all talking with each other about, okay, so can we come back next weekend? Let's all come back as a group. And it was just so cool to see that transformation. It's a transformation that would never happen in the classroom, would never happen on the field, on the track, or whatever. But it wouldn't have happened if they hadn't had those multiple days in a row. So I think there is something really special to that.
Well, that's courageous as an institution of education, to take them out of academics and put them in these situations.
Yeah, and so I just think that, you know, when it comes to the mission of our school, what we're trying to accomplish, like, that's the core of it.
Adam, do you want to talk to the guardianship quickly? Just, I think this is such an interesting idea, and it's something PPA has been looking at, ways to involve the parents more with the boarding program, with kids who are coming from different cultures, kids coming from the bridge program, all of that.
Sure, yeah. As it currently stands, the boarding students that don't have someone, and we sort of loosely sort of contain it to like the Bay Area or maybe an hour away or something like that, need a guardian, right? And the best kind of relationships happen when it is sort of a day student family sort of connecting with a boarder from somewhere around the world. That way they get over Thanksgiving or something like that, they don't have to travel, hours away, but rather can have a really interesting kind of cultural deep dive experience, as Matt's sort of pointing out. For a lot of those kids, they won't ever get that experience, unless a family here offers. I recognize that it's a gigantic ask. It's a huge amount of time. You're opening up your house. Who is this kid? Right? Like that. It's a big ask. But I think, as you heard before, I think the value there can be gigantic. Not only, of course, for the boarding student who gets, a lovely home to home away from home, but probably also for your sons and daughters who, meet someone who's maybe not their best friend, connect with somebody else in the class from a different culture, that sort of thing. Yeah, those have been gigantically beneficial. And right now, what Miles and I are sort of wrestling with up in the boarding program is how do we think that through, not only strategically for our ends, but then you guys are already, you might know, paying to be here, right? And then this is a whole nother thing, right? This is a whole nother thing, right? And I'm always very wary to sort of say, and do this, and do this, and do this, even though I do think there would be value there, certainly for my kids and for you guys. So we're trying to think through how we can sort of do that. But if you're interested, call me at 3 in the morning, whenever you want.
He doesn't mean that. And what we'll do is, a number of our boarding students have guardians in the area already. Their aunt or uncle who happens to live here. But what we'll do is, in the springtime, we'll take a look at the boarding students who don't have guardians in the area. We'll send out an email. Usually we try to line it up with the grade level that they're in. So if it's a 9th grade boarding student, we might send out an email to the 9th grade families and just say, if anybody's interested in a guardian, we've got a student, blah, 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 we'll try and match up the best.
Yeah, this was actually the backstory with the Weisses. Kim, the aforementioned German student, her guardian, the student got a really cool equestrian opportunity. I can't remember exactly how that happened. And so she left, not under bad circumstances, good circumstances, but Kim was left without a guardian, right? And so the Weisses jumped in, which was really lovely of them. And then that's been such a positive relationship for our kid and then for their kid and their families.
Just to piggyback on that, our youngest son had a boarder stay at our house just over a 3-day holiday. I mean, he didn't board or anything, but he became friends, which is a good idea to go up to the boarding area if you're a day student and play ping pong or pool, watch TV with the kids up there. It's a good thing. But my point is, if you're not ready to say, I want to be a guardian, you can try it out, see if you like. I mean, Bill came to our house, Sebastian spent time in our house, so it's great. I mean, it's an amazing experience. Even it might give you a little preview to what it might be like to be a guardian. You're just doing it for 3 days, and then, well, maybe I do want to be a guardian.
Absolutely.
Just one last thing I want to say, when Matt was talking about if kids hadn't gone through that threshold of sticking with the organization, they might not have, realized the rewards of that experience. It is actually, with quite a few kids gone even beyond service week at this point. Like, we have kids that have developed long-term relationships with some of the elderly at Sequoias and gone and helped them. We had a regular thing for a while where they were going over and helping them with their technology, like how to use an iPhone, right, and use apps and so forth. We've had, I think Billy went back to the Siena Youth Center after we worked with them last year and participated in a march about equity in housing, and in Redwood City. And came back and was talking about that, and so made these connections beyond, and so brought out some of their passions. But then the sort of to have that ability to do that at 16 or 17 is pretty awesome. Make those connections.
Before we wrap up, are there questions? We've had a lot of wonderful input and suggestions. Are there questions you have for any of our three, except whatever your son or daughter is going to get in?
Place to find the different groups that you do community service with?
Great question. So we had that with on our old system of haiku list, and so we do have a community service page now on Blackbaud there, where the kids now enter their hours, or not their hours, their experiences, and we're gonna build that part out. But the organizations that, what I will do is, right before service week, I'll send something out to all parents. Here's service week in a nutshell. Here's all the organizations we're working with. But yes, the idea is to build that on the website and add to that, because sometimes students find great organizations and parents that we don't necessarily have access to.
Thank you so much.